You probably have seen a couple time lapses in videos on the internet. Today I want to talk about how you can easily get time lapses with a GoPro or an iPhone, and also with the Sony A7 line and the Timelapse app. The one thing that I want to focus on is how to get the easiest possible file format to actually work with and not have to work on the time lapse on the computer after you have actually created this with a camera. The great thing about time-lapsing is you can take so much better quality time-lapses than you can take videos with rather cheap cameras. So if you have a camera that can only shoot 1080p video, you can maybe shoot 4K or maybe even 6 or 8K time-lapses, because each frame is just one single photo. So you can take photos at 24 megapixels and then you can combine those to a time-lapse. But that is one thing that needs additional work. So you actually have to take the photos with the camera, then you bring them to your computer, then you put them into After Effects or maybe LR Timelapse, which is a tool specifically made for time-lapse video, and then you can render those out to become a video after. But this is a lot of work, and in the normal kind of workflow of making some simple videos and some simple, or let's not say simple, but some edits much faster and easier than with this kind of time-lapse workflow. Newer cameras actually have the video capabilities internally to take a picture every second or maybe even 5 seconds, and then you can combine those inside the camera to a video, and then once you're back on the computer you have a video file and you can just use that video file in your next video you want to edit. This is possible with the iPhone, the GoPro, and also the Sony A7 line, where there is a paid feature, the Timelapse app, which you have to buy in the Sony A7 app store, I would say. It's a little bit of a hassle to actually get it on your camera, but once you have it on your A7, it's a really nice feature to have because you can use it for multiple things, one of them being time lapses. With an iPhone, the easiest way to capture a time-lapse is just to open the camera app, and then you can just scroll over, and you first start out with the photo mode, then you have the video mode, the slow motion mode, and the last one is the time-lapse mode. Now, in general, I would definitely suggest to have something like a mini tripod and an adapter for a phone, so you can just put the camera on a table, on the floor, put it somewhere, and then just click start, basically. What you will get is a file that is a combined video file with the photos the camera took, and then you can watch it as a video, you can bring it to your computer and watch it as a video, and it's just a regular 1080p video file that you can use in any project you like. Another interesting time-lapsing app on the iPhone or maybe even Android is Hyperlapse from Instagram. The nice thing about the Hyperlapse app is it actually stabilizes the footage massively. So for example, you could take this into your hand and walk around a city while recording the hyperlapse, and then after you're done, you can stop the recording and it will automatically calculate the video to be more or less really stable. And that is a really nice thing to have, because that way the jittery movement of you yourself, or maybe you're riding a bike through a city, you can also do the same thing, mount the camera to the bike and then just ride this bike through the city, and with the hyperlapse it really makes a nice stable footage. Now these are the easy ways to get a time-lapse with your phone, and a phone is actually, I think, a great way to capture a time-lapse because it is something you probably have with you almost everywhere you go, so you can just put it somewhere on a small tripod, do a photo shoot, shoot the location or take the pictures or the videos you want, and then pick up your iPhone later on after you're finished, and then you have a nice time-lapse additionally to other video files or photos. Another great camera to make time-lapses is a GoPro, especially for some kinds of behind-the-scenes capture, because it's a really small camera. You can mount it to everything if you have the correct mounts, and then you can just switch to the time-lapse mode by clicking this camera icon, switch to the timer icon, which is the third one in this row, and from there you can select time-lapse video, time-lapse photo, or night-lapse photo. The time-lapse photo mode is actually really nice if you want to use the singular photo. So for example, if you want to shoot yourself, or maybe you want to put the camera somewhere and then you walk in front of the camera and then you want to pose in front of the camera, the time-lapse photo mode is really nice for that, because it takes a picture every second or maybe 3 seconds. So that way you have a couple of photos and then you can just select the one which you want to use. I personally think that is a much easier mode than, for example, a timer mode where you have 10 seconds to get into position and then you have to be ready and then you have to walk back to the camera, set it again and hit the shutter again. With a time-lapse photo mode on the GoPro, for example, or also on the Sony, you can just use that mode to take a self-portrait without going back and forth between the camera and standing in front of it. So the time-lapse photo mode is a great mode for that. If you want to, however, to actually make a time-lapse video with as little effort as possible, you go for the time-lapse video mode. The other settings here are the quality, the time it takes between each frame, and also the field of view. The GoPro Hero 5 now offers the linear mode, which essentially is a medium field of view, but it does not have this kind of warping effect the normal GoPro footage has. So if you want to take in as much information as possible, you would go for super view, but if you want to have a straight line, then you would go for linear. And I personally really like the linear mode because it gives a really nice kind of footage and doesn't have those warped lines. In terms of the interval, I would go for 0.5 or maybe 1 second if you want to take the self-portrait mode in the time-lapse photo mode, and I would go for maybe 2 or 5 seconds if I want to shoot a scene. And if you want to shoot something where subjects move slower, for example, if you want to shoot a cloudy sky, maybe 5 or 2 seconds is enough. But if you want to shoot more detail and the time lapse itself is less long, so if you only want to set up the camera for 10 minutes, for example, I would probably go for something 1 or maybe even 0.5 seconds, because then the movement is not enough and the time frame in which you are capturing is also compressed. The thing you have to take into consideration when setting up the interval is that if you capture in 10 seconds, for example, you only capture 6 frames per minute. So if you capture for 10 minutes, that is only 60 frames. Now, considering that playback is probably at 24 frames per second, you would have only about 2 or 3 seconds worth of video if you shoot for 10 minutes with 10-second intervals. Now, if you actually shoot for 2 hours, that might be enough, because then you have approximately 10 seconds of footage. But if you only shoot for 10 minutes, I would go for a shorter setting, maybe even 1 or 2 seconds, and then the camera captures more frames, and that way you have a nicer kind of time lapse, which also is a couple seconds long, because that is rather uninteresting if you only have 2 seconds of video. But having it set to 1 second, for example, linear field of view, in terms of the resolution you have 4K, 2.7K and 1080p, but to actually be able to use the linear mode, you actually have to be in 1080p, because in 4K and 2.7K you can only shoot in the wide setting. So with these time-lapse video modes on the iPhone and also the GoPro, you have a really nice time on the computer, because then you can just drag in those files into Premiere or maybe iMovie. You can make them a little bit slower, maybe a little bit faster, but that way you have a easy time-lapse, and the video files it captures are not that massively big, because if you just set up the camera and record for 10 minutes, then you have a gigabyte of storage, for example. But if you actually record the time-lapse video, you have just maybe 10 or 20 seconds of video, and that way you have much less storage on the computer and it's just easier to work with. So if you know you want to time lapse it, just use those video time lapse modes. Those make it really easy to use in Premiere or iMovie. Another camera you can use for time-lapse video is the Sony A7 Mark II or any of the Sony A7 cameras, but for that you actually have to install an app, and then you can go to the application list. And once this is installed, and I will link a tutorial in the description below where you can find a tutorial how to actually get this app on your camera, then you can have the time-lapse app, and you can just start that. And with the time-lapse app, you're then able to have the settings on here to also record a video like I just showed before. Let's switch to manual mode. And right here you can see that I have set it up to 3 seconds, taking as many pictures as possible, and the video in the end would be 49 seconds long. And now I can go into the settings, go to the application settings, and here I actually can choose between the file formats, and the file formats can change between taking photos and video, which I have set right now, just photos or just video. I personally refer to the just photo and video, because that way I am pretty much secure either if I want to do self-portraits or some kind of time-lapse portraits or maybe a group shot, because then I have photo and video. But if I want to just use the video files, then I can also use the video file for the time-lapse in a new lifestyle video or whatever I want to produce. Then I can change the interval, I can change the how many shots I want to take, and in this case I just take the most amount of shots because I just stop the recording whenever I want to. And there you have a couple more settings in terms of the exposure, and also you will see which kind of image will be produced and how long the time-lapse will be in the end. So now you saw how to take time-lapse videos on the GoPro, on the iPhone, or on the A7 Mark II, or any of the A7 cameras with the time-lapse app. As mentioned before, I have a link in the description below where I will link to a tutorial how to get the A7 kind of play app to actually use the time lapses. This app is actually not free, it's 10 euros, which is kind of ridiculous and I think should not be the case, but it's basically the only option aside from buying an intervalometer, which you can plug into the camera and then shoot a time lapse with that. But that only lets you shoot the picture time lapse, so that way you actually have to combine them on the computer in the post-processing, which is much more work. So I prefer to shoot the time lapses with this app, and then the camera automatically creates a video file, and I just use the video file on the computer in the Premiere Pro project. Now I hope this video was helpful for you. If it was, please let me know by giving a like or sharing it to someone. Leave me a comment below if you have any questions about this stuff, and also leave a comment down below if you have any more questions about using or processing time-lapse videos on the computer. Subscribe to this channel for more videos like this in the future, and I will see you in the next video. Until then, have an amazing day. Bye.